Hello, everyone, and welcome to Asian Viewpoints. I'm Mary Sitt. The stats on domestic abuse are sobering. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men are victims of severe physical violence from an intimate partner. And the sensational cases always capture the headlines. There's Gabby Petito last year, who was killed by her fiance on a cross-country trip. And more recently, Brian Walsh of Cohasset, Massachusetts, who is charged with murdering his wife, his 39-year-old wife, Anna, the mother of their 3 children. With us today is Chau Nguyen. She is a psychotherapist and she's a licensed master social worker who specializes in helping survivors of trauma. Chau, thank you so much for being with us.
Mary, thank you so much for having me and raising awareness about this really important subject.
You know, these 2 cases I mentioned, unfortunately, the women did not survive their abusers. How often do the abusers end up actually killing their victims?
Well, it happens more often than you know. Houston has witnessed a number of murder-suicides in the recent months, in the recent years. Violence against women and particularly domestic violence-related homicides are up in our communities. So it is prevalent. We know a few things about domestic violence and murders, and in most of the cases, committed by men against women in intimate partner situations. They commit it against the person with whom they say they love, in the act of rage, right?
Chau, is this increasing or is it being better reported? I mean, has this always happened to no one, hush hush under the rug type of thing, and women are being more vocal, or is it actually getting worse?
I don't know if it's worsening or if it's getting better. It's, domestic violence and abuse has been around as long as man's been around, right? But
Right.
we know that at the turn of the late 70s, at the turn of the women's movement, women were being more vocal. Our communities were getting more vocal about abuse. And you're right, abuse started in hush hush. You don't talk about it. It happens behind closed doors. But now we have platforms where we are talking about it, not only just sharing about what happened, the tragedy on the news, right? Hearing it on the news, but we've got advocacy organizations, we've got women's movements that are looking to end violence, and we've got a whole number of counselors like myself, advocates, those who are deeply embedded in this work.
Chau, how do you define domestic abuse? Someone might say, well, he has a little temper and every once in a while he yells, but he doesn't really touch me or anything. How do you define it?
It's interesting when people think about domestic violence, their minds typically go to the physical violence. But behind the physical violence, there were a lot of things that may have led to physical violence.
Okay.
And when we look at domestic violence, we look at the exertion of power and control and manipulation from one person to the next. Now,
Okay.
power, control, manipulation can look like a lot of different things. It could look like words. It could look like jealousy. It could look like stalking. It could look like taking away the finances, financial abuse. It could look like isolating somebody from somebody else, but one person exerting their power and control over another. And that is domestic violence. It's not just the physical. It's a lot of times the emotional wounds, the manipulation are what leaves a lifetime of trauma.
So when should a woman leave? Because it's usually men who are doing this. When should a woman leave? When there are 2 or 3 of those factors, or, don't leave unless you are physically hurt?
Leaving is very complicated. We know that it takes an average of 5 to 7 times before somebody says, I've had it and I'm going to leave. And here are the big barriers, and they are big barriers. Children and money, right? A lot of survivors that we've counseled say they can't leave because he's the breadwinner, or who's going to take care of the kids? How am I going to manage? So it's really hard to tell a survivor, just leave. It's really complicated. And then you add on the layer of love. People love their abusers. Abusers don't show up like abusers 24/7. They might be a cycle, what we call a violence, right? It could be the eruption of something bad, and then you come down, and then there's a honeymoon phase.
And then they're very charming and very sweet and very romantic, right? And then it pops up again.
It's so complicated. And when we look at the neurobiology of trauma, and what that means is violence can change how you think. It can change neural pathways. You could kind of lose the person you were. You might have entered the marriage. I've got a client who entered this relationship 10, 13 years ago as an independent, confident woman. And 10 to 13 years later looks back and says, what happened to me? How did I find myself in that relationship? Oh, that's right. I loved him. Oh, that's right. Things got better. Oh, that's right. I had hope. Oh, wait, I had a kid. Now I'm
Mhm.
trying to hide. Now I'm trying to, so that cycle of violence can go on for years. And, best we as bystanders look at survivors with compassion and empathy and not judgment. Now, leaving is very complicated. You talked about it's so easy to say, why don't you just leave? But that comes across as judgmental.
Right, right.
Isolates survivors. What you should say is, I hear you. I'm sorry. And the important thing is, there is help out there. There are resources, mental health services. I'm a trauma therapist. I worked at a domestic violence organization for a number of years. There is support and there is a way out.
Chau, can therapy really help someone heal from that kind of abuse? And how
Absolutely.
much therapy do you need to really heal?
There's no real timeline on therapy. What I tell my clients is sometimes healing is, it's not linear. It can take
Mhm.
a lifetime, but the courage to come to somebody to seek support is usually a big step, right? You're already there.
Right.
The other thing that happens is trauma gets trapped in your bodies. So the effects of trauma can look like anxiety, depression, addiction, sleeplessness, restlessness. Those are the symptoms we treat in the trauma. And those symptoms can be treated with the help of a mental health clinician. I'm EMDR trained, which really links the traumatic events and
Wait, what does
refocus.
EMBR stand for?
I'm so sorry. It's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's
Okay.
a model of psychotherapy that really taps into looking at past memories. Sometimes when bad things happen to us,
Mhm.
our brains remember that piece as if it just happened today or yesterday, and
Mm.
trauma triggers happen. And so sometimes
Okay.
you might say, why am I feeling anxious, depressed? Why do I have a memory of that? And it freezes me. We
Chau,
help
every case is different and every person is different. But as a therapist, do you feel like there are key principles that you feel every person who's been abused needs to work through to move ahead? There's certain things that everyone can do who's experienced that or needs to do to move on.
You're right. Every case is very different. I think what I say to survivors, what they need to hear is, it's very courageous for you to come and seek help, that you're not alone, that this happened to you, but that doesn't define you. The trauma and the abuse isn't you. That's a piece of you, and we can work through that piece of you so that you can get whole again and healed.
That they can become whole again. And when abuse happens, it's not just between the two adults. Often there are children around, right, who witness that. How do you help those kids?
Children who witness violence in homes. We call this an adverse childhood experience. So we look at children who witness violence, and that, three things can happen. They can grow up and commit those crimes, become victims themselves,
Mhm.
and really blame themselves. So we have to work with children who are witnesses to violence and help them heal as well, because the effects that can last a lifetime to them can be very debilitating, not only for themselves, but from our community. If you
Right.
have a child who's witnessed violence and that child grows up and exacts that violence again, then you're perpetuating that violence cycle.
Chau, is there a national hotline for domestic violence?
The hotline.org. That
Okay.
is a website you can go to, the hotline.org. You can talk to people. A lot of people who are experiencing abuse, they don't even know that they're experiencing. They're trying to navigate. Something doesn't feel right, right? He took away my phone. He's looking at it. He's getting jealous. There's bouts of rage. I've never understood that. Those are kind of warning signs. He's isolating me from my friends, but they can call an advocate and say, is this violence? Is this
Right.
abuse? And so those toll-free hotlines, which are supported by funders in our community and in government, are so critical to take that first step to see if you're in a violent relationship.
And we'll put those on the screen. Okay, Chau Nguyen, thank you so much for being with us, and raising awareness is a very important topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you found this video informative, please click the like button below and be sure to subscribe to this channel. I'll be putting a new video up every Thursday. I'm Mary Sis. I'll see you again in the next video.